our London guest, into the discussion at this point. Do you think this attack will underscore the message of the far right in Europe, at least, of the incompatibility of Islam and the West, or Western values?
That's a pretty atrocious question, if I may say so. We're about 24 hours away from 12 people being gunned down in a newspaper office in the center of Paris, in a European city, because they offended, allegedly, Islamic blasphemy laws which France, Britain, and other European countries do not have and do not believe in and do not follow. And for you to turn the question immediately, not on the people who've been massacred because of asserting their rights as European French citizens, but onto the alleged terrible discrimination of the French, is really quite despicable.
So I didn't ask you anything about discrimination of the French. Let me repeat the question.
You went straight on to the alleged backlash.
Let me ask you the question again in case you didn't understand it. Do you think this attack, we are in our news bulletins talking in more detail about the actual attack. What you were invited to discuss in this show are the implications of what might follow the attack. Will it underscore the message of those who say there is an incompatibility between Western values and Muslim values?
No, you want to paint the narrative which you think turns immediately, not from the attackers, but on the French society, which you would like to portray. I'm giving you my answer, so why don't you listen to it? Which you would like to portray as somehow anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic or anything like this. Let's start from the fact that 12 people were massacred because European citizens asserted their right, which they have every right to do, to draw Muhammad just as they have the right to draw any other historical figure, which they believe in or don't believe in. It doesn't matter. They have that right. I don't think at this stage whether, a discussion of the far right in France or anything like that is really the point. The point is people were killed and gunned down for doing their job as journalists and cartoonists in a free society.
Okay, let's try with our guest joining us from France. Perhaps she would like to address the question. Do you think there is a message coming out of this, of the incompatibility of Muslim and Western values? It seems our guest in London doesn't want to tackle that. Perhaps you would.
I think that's what the killers would like us to believe. They're French. They were brought up in this country, and they made this choice to become what they've become. They've killed a policeman, for example, who was also from an Algerian background like them, French citizen as well. So I think this is not the issue, and this should never be the issue. This is the issue they want us to address, and they want to make that statement that there is an incompatibility between two worlds. I think they are extremists, and I think we should not let other extremists on the other side who believe that as well, like our extremists here from the right wing or extreme right wing, who believe that there is an incompatibility between an Islamic world and a Western world. I think we should never allow this question to be put.
Well, whenever these discussions start, you never have any idea as to what type of which Douglas Murray is going to be there. Is it going to be laid back, sort of nerdy, calm, just give the answers? Or are you going to get the feisty brawler that comes out of Douglas? And that all depends usually upon who he's debating, how the other person is treating him. This moderator asked a question. Douglas didn't like the way it was framed and basically thought it was disgusting to come out this way. The moderator didn't back down at all. He basically told Douglas, hey, look, we asked you to come here to give an analysis. I'm going to ask the question. Perhaps you didn't understand the question. Let me tell you to you again. I'm sure Douglas didn't like that one bit. And then when he went to the when he went to the correspondent there from France, the lady, he goes, well, it seems that our guest from London doesn't want to answer the question. Perhaps you'd like to take a try at it. Oh, I'm sure Douglas was just absolutely fuming, and you could tell by his body language. Now, that lady, I just have to basically differ with what she's saying is, there is an incompatibility here, but it is not between, I don't think it's between, let's just say, first of all, Islamic governments there is no separation between church and state. It's all the same. It's intertwined. All right? Now, you can decide to call that good or bad, just like people say, well, you know what? We don't like the fact that there's a separation of church and state. Many Christians in this country will say that we don't like the fact. We want it to be, it was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Why can't it be together? But there's a reason why the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution are there for. We know that reason, so that the individual has the rights, that the government can't force you to do something against your will. At least that's in essence in theory, and that theory has been put to practice here in the United States for over 250 years. And thank God for that. Now, the incompatibility comes with is that whether or not you could say that there's going to be a theocratic state that's going to just completely do good all the time, it still would be incompatible with the West because there's no separation. Everybody here on the Western side said there needs to be a separation. So that lady, when she's talking about that the killers there, the Charlie Hebdo, they wanted to show that they're the extremists. They absolutely are. They're the fundamentalists. They're the radicalists. But they're the ones that are trying to show everybody that there is an incompatibility. Anyways, we're going to get back to Douglas and more of the Charlie Hebdo interview. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. That's what we have on tap for you today, folks. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective on what happens when everything like this collides. Douglas Murray, moderators, culture, religion, politics, government, social media, they all come crashing together. Let's get back to the interview with Douglas Murray on Al Jazeera.
Studio here. One thing which you mentioned to me just before we started was you're surprised at some of the reaction that has developed since this terrible attack that's happened on the offices of Charlie Hebdo. Tell us a little bit about how you see, what message you're taking away as a cartoonist, as a Muslim, about the compatibility of values or incompatibility.
I'm Sudanese. I speak Arabic, but I do most of my cartoons either in English or no comment because I'm trying to bridge that gap. I'm trying to reach out to the people in the West because of this incompatibility issue. I want to show them that we are the same. We're going through the same problems that you are. We are affected by extremists just like you are. We are as much scared, and we are the biggest victims of extremist attacks in the world. So I because of mainstream media does not tackle these issues, and all they focus on is the differences. They don't focus on how we're all alike. We all grew up in the same world, and what we should know about each other, and what we should respect about each other's cultures, and know about each other, so we can live along. Like just make a middle line and walk together, basically, and instead of just pointing fingers. Mm-hmm. So. This is what I think should happen, and this is what I think should we should all work towards.
All right, thank you very much, Douglas in London. No doubt there will be a lot of thought as to how policy should proceed going forward. What do you think the policy should be? What are the practical policy lessons learned from this attack?
Well, there are no practical policy lessons learned. People are still mourning the dead and identifying bodies. The thing that is going to happen in the weeks and days ahead is that people are going to have a set of questions. The first will be obvious security questions, simply about how it was that two people were able to go into the office in Paris with Kalashnikovs and gun people down in cold blood. That will certainly be a part of it. There's a technical security discussion to be had. There's also a discussion about wider society and what its reaction should be and all that sort of thing. But really the most febrile and important discussion at the moment is the one that the free press is having across Europe, which is whether or not they will stand up and retain the right to do what we in Europe and free peoples have the right to do, which is to draw what we like. And the key message from this really can't be emphasized enough, because your guest in Doha is a cartoonist. He knows very well that he can't draw a cartoon of Muhammad there. Even if he wanted to, he wouldn't, because his life would be at great risk.
I wouldn't do that
you wouldn't do it.
Sir. No.
And one of the reasons, you wouldn't do it.
Sir,
maybe it's not just because. Can I just finish my point?
Okay, finish
One
your
of the
point, then we'll
reasons,
give Khalid a chance.
if you are a Muslim, you may decide not to do that. However, in countries like Britain and France, most of us are not Muslims, and we do not believe in Muhammad as the founder of any faith that we follow. People are Christians, atheists, all sorts of things. You cannot expect, and this is the crucial thing, Muslims should not expect non-Muslims to abide by their own belief systems. You can yourself decide, you as a Muslim do not want to depict Muhammad. But the idea that is coming along in Europe at the moment is a growing idea that people who are not Muslims, who do not believe in Muhammad, who do not follow Islam, are also to be have to obey the rules of Islamic blasphemy. And in Europe at the moment, that is the big debate.
You've made that point, Douglas. You wanted to go.
And therein, folks, lies the incompatibility. Freedom of speech. Now, there are some, for example, in France, there's anti-Semitic laws. I believe there's anti-Semitic laws in Britain in terms of speech. That even if the speech doesn't contain violence in France, if you say that you don't believe in the Holocaust, you could go to jail. So people in America would go, well, wait a minute, that's an opinion. An opinion is speech. So there is curtailment of speech. There's an incompatibility between the French system and the American system. Of course there's an incompatibility between the British system and the American system of government. So that's the only difference, is that the French system is not radicalized, the British system is not radicalized, the American system is not radicalized. Unless you go to the far reaches of the far left or the far right. But the Islamists are making an incompatibility issue by what they're doing, because they're basically saying you have to follow, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim or atheist or Jewish or Christian or Hindu or whatever, even if you're in the country dominated by a religion other than Islam, you still have to follow, we believe, and that's what these killers of the Charlie Hebdo massacre were basically saying is, doesn't matter, we're in France, France should be a Muslim country, it should be under Sharia law, on and on and on.
Wouldn't draw a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad because of these issues, because this is how we grew up, because this is our culture. We do not do that. But in the argument about freedom of speech, I mean, yes, the West does have freedom of speech, and yes, you should fight to keep that freedom of speech. I accept that totally, and I believe in that, right? As a cartoonist and as a human being, and for me as a cartoonist who does not have that freedom to that extent, right? But at the same time, if you have all these rights, if you have all this power, why would you want to use it to upset a whole population? Why would you want to do that?
Life is upsetting all the time.
We already live in a troubled world. We already live in a troubled world, sir. Right. We already.
Let's get beyond that platitude for a second and get on to the substance of it. Let's get on to the substance of it.
Douglas, don't interrupt him now. We gave you a chance. Douglas, just give him a chance to finish.
Every single cartoonist in Britain and in Europe is able to, and many of them do, make jokes around Christmas time and so on about the Virgin Mary, three wise men and so on. We accept that as the right. What Charlie Hebdo was trying to do, and what others have asserted the right to do, is to treat Islam exactly as they treat every other religion.
Okay, you've made that point, and the shooting, of course, has been widely described as an attack on freedom of speech, as we're hearing from our panel here. France prides itself on the right of freedom of speech, but even that does have certain limits. The Gay Salt Act, for example, makes denial of the Holocaust a criminal offense. The Pleven Act prohibits incitement to hatred, discrimination or slander based on race or gender. 2003 law made it a crime to insult the French flag or national anthem, and the country's public health code makes it illegal to present a favorable view of drug use. Catherine, is there a place for...
Before he gets to Catherine there, I didn't know the other two. Now, for example, flag burning in America. freedom of speech, already ruled on by the Supreme Court. France says you can't say anything about the national anthem. You can't do anything about the flag. Those athletes and everybody else that started kneeling, Colin Kaepernick, they would be in jail in France. They would be in jail. You wouldn't be able to do that. And as far as promoting drug use or whatever, I wasn't aware of that. But now there are a lot of people in America that would say, that might, hey, yeah, you want to promote drug use? You know what? You're going to go to jail, or you're going to have to go to court, and you're going to have to, have a court date to say, what is it that you were trying to do there? So again, different societies will come up with different policies and laws at that time to decide how they want to shape their societies going forward. The only difference is that does that implementation, is there any radical element that becomes radicalized against that and then start to go against that with violence and terrorism and murder and atrocities? That's the difference that doesn't occur in Western societies for the most part by Westerners. Anyways, let's continue with Catherine and see what she has to say about this.
A discussion about the inclusiveness of Europe, of how far Europe should go in being inclusive, or as Douglas would present it, how far Europe shouldn't be asked to compromise its principles when it comes to accommodating the sentiments of Muslims.
Charlie Hebdo was sued for the caricatures of Mohammed in 2007. And the then editor of Charlie Hebdo, Philippe Val, said, we're not talking about belief, we're talking about ideologies. Is radical Islam, Islam used as an excuse for killing a belief or an ideology? If we are talking about ideology, there is a freedom of speech in this country, as in many others, and any ideology can be challenged, can be criticized in many ways. You can do it by fiction, you can do it by a report, you can do it investigation, you can do it with a cartoon. And this is what we're talking about. I think we should not mix up everything. You talked about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is a fact that historians worldwide have established as a fact, meaning they view scientific methods of academics, to prove that it has actually happened. Denying the Holocaust is an ideology. And this is not, should I believe it's happened or not? It has happened. It's a scientific fact. If you challenge that, then it's an ideology. And if it does prompt hatred, yes, hatred is challenged, not only challenged, but by law forbidden. And Charlie Hebdo was sued by Muslim associations in 2007 for those those Mohammed caricatures on this basis, on hatred prompted on religious grounds. And Charlie Hebdo, I didn't agree with all that happened. I mean, I'm not a fan of Charlie Hebdo, but they went to court and it was decided that, yes, on the grounds of ideology, they are allowed to challenge radical Islam. Not Islam, radical Islam. Charlie Hebdo is used to having trials. They have a budget for that, like every other satirical newspapers worldwide. And they have been sued 14 times by Catholic, extreme right Catholics, only once by Muslim associations. So, let's not mix up everything. Are we talking again about an ideology? And if yes, and I think we are here, men who kill because they don't agree with your ideas, they make a statement. It's not in the belief of Islam to do that. I don't think so. So in that sense, yes, every ideology should be challenged in a world where the freedom of speech of the press is respected.
Where do you draw the line between?
So from what I get from Catherine in that piece is that she's determined between a belief and an ideology. Now, I would counter basically saying that a belief is also an opinion. You can have a right opinion, a wrong opinion. You can hold a belief. It could be right, it could be wrong. A belief in a religion can neither be right or wrong because it's your belief. Other people may believe that you're wrong, but you believe that you're right. Now, the ideology of that, I think, is a manifestation of what do you do with those beliefs. Do you keep it internal or external? Internal meaning you just keep it for yourself, your family, and you go about your business. External could mean is that maybe that you want to proselytize, you want to go and convert people, whatever. As long as you're doing it non-violently, you're doing it, okay, there's no harm in everybody saying, hey, I believe this, I think you ought to believe this too. Here's the reasons why. Let's sit down, discuss, and see. And if you don't, great. And if you do, fine. And that goes for any religion, Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, you name it, whatever. Now, of course, she's talking about, she thinks that it becomes an ideology in terms of the Holocaust to deny it. I would counter to say that's a belief, a wrong belief, but it's a belief. Now, if somebody goes around doing terrorist acts in the face of saying that the Holocaust didn't occur and do similar atrocities, now you've crossed into the realm of ideology. And so I think that's where she's trying to make that distinction in Charlie Hebdo, where she was saying the lawsuits are coming, is that we're looking at this not in terms of attacking a belief, we're doing it in terms of showing or caricaturing an ideology. And that lies the difference. Anyways, let's continue.
Between radical Islam and what is Islam? Is that something that Europe is still grappling with? What is considered legitimate debate about radical Islam, and what is considered hate speech against Muslims when you have thousands of rallies of thousands of people saying, you know, calling basically that there is no place for Muslims and Muslim values in Europe?
If I could, sorry, Douglas, you up on that?
No, can you let me finish actually my question? When you have thousands of people calling for calls which sound very similar to the minds of some for the calls for expulsions of Jews from Europe during the Second World War, where do you draw the line between what is legitimate debate and what is simply racism when it comes to Islam? Catherine.
Okay, maybe we have to work on our vocabulary. When I call it radical Islam, maybe I shouldn't say that. I should just say people who use Islam as an excuse to kill. And you're right, you have fundamental